was pretty significant impact. I think fraud was brought down by 60% or so, which was amazing, and all the top banks adopted it and so on. So that kind of started my journey, and how can we use that to also accurately predict credit risk? So they were doing it once a month. Can you do it at every transaction? Because maybe I was behaving very well till last month, and now I start gambling. I'm really getting into trouble. We are better off reducing the credit line right away, and so on. So it grew. It grew into marketing in a number of different areas. And once we did that, I was actually recruited by the CEO of SAS Institute. I went there to start their advanced analytics solutions division. And there, what we tried to do was really enterprise fraud. So can you actually look at all of the transactions? So let's say you have a bank account, you have a mortgage account, you have credit card, you have debit card. Can all of these be looked at in real time? Seems like a simple problem. It's a very complex problem. Again, what we came up with was extremely useful and very successful as well. And then I started looking at other industries that were sort of more in the nascent stage in terms of using analytics. And for example, if you look at authentication, analytics is being used very sparingly, right? I mean, you don't really need to authenticate 100% of the transactions. You know enough about the entities that are trying to authenticate that you should be able to allow certain transactions through very easily and save a lot of revenue. So similarly, if you're trying to monitor a huge application space or an infrastructure, you can actually do it very effectively because you know the behavior, you can predict and so on. So that's kind of what I did. And now at Accenture, we have a very large operations division, and we collect lots and lots of data in multiple industries, F&A, human resources, on and on and on, digital marketing and so on. How can we use all of this data to automate things so that, first of all, the people working on stuff can be elevated to do something more interesting, better, not the mundane stuff? And also, how can we grow without having to, go, again, hire hordes of people, right? I mean, how can we actually reutilize them? So that is kind of what I'm doing now. It was a lengthy...
So Rev, that was supposed to be a 60-second introduction. So now you've blown my timeline, so Mohan will kill me, but this is a perfect opportunity to plug in her book. So she wrote this book while she was leaving SAS on bank fraud. And of course, I don't know if you're selling it here, but you can go and check it out. Now, what is interesting from her answer, the introduction, is that she got started with data science long before it was the sexiest profession of the century, right? Long before DJ Patil, our friend, came up with that thing. So definitely, you've been doing data, and my personal experience as well. I've spent 25 plus years in the services industry, sometimes with banks, insurance companies, and different industries myself. And I've seen the use of data for deriving insights and deriving better business decisions. So that's what we've been doing all this while. People come up with terms like sexy terms like data engineering, big data architecture, and so on and so forth. And so data science being one, data scientist being one profession, the other profession that has come into light is chief data officer or CDO. Some call it chief digital officer. And then there is the chief analytics officer as well. So that's kind of proliferation of the services industry. As time is changing, the industry is progressing into creating these new roles. So your thoughts on it, Revati, and there have been opposing views as well. As some of these roles are coming in, some are saying, no, that's passive, and now CDO will not last for more than 2 years. So is this a buzzword, or are you really seeing something like this with your clients?
Yeah, I think whether we call it CDO or whatever, I think the role will be very important. So, just to compare and contrast what was happening 10, 15 years ago versus now, I think the recognition that you have to look at data, derive value from it, and be able to use it, in production processes has come about, right? Instead of just looking in the rearview mirror, you really want to build something that fits with the domain that can actually deliver value. Now, in order to do that, you need to start collecting the right data from day one. But in most industries, it has been an afterthought, right? I mean, you start with something, you build up operations, and then as an afterthought, you analyze all the data, and then you say, say, oops, we didn't go collect that, right? I think these positions of chief analytics officer, chief digital officer, data officer, they really provide a focus in terms of having somebody who drives that, right? To make sure that we are thinking in a data-driven way across the entire company. Because, people have different functions. There's a sales function, marketing function, product management. All of them cannot, they just don't have the time to think about data. I think having that position really helps. And a lot of companies actually seen a lot of value from that position. Even though I also heard you say that even the CDO roles are becoming a little,
Yeah, I think it
not fashionable now.
depends on who got started first. And I know I've personally helped a couple of banks in Latin America and some of the organizations, CPG sector here to start their governance programs, and governance program morphs into a chief data officer program. And essentially it helps to have a seat on the table, right?
Correct.
That's very important. Many, many years back when I got started in the consulting industry, I've always been data-driven. I've always done business with insights, business intelligence or analytics, whatever you call it. But people with the skills in data never had the say in board-level decisions, which has changed and transformed in the last 10, 15 years, more in the last 5 years than ever. At the pace at which we are seeing this transformation happening is phenomenal, and people with data skills are getting more respect. So in a way, people with statistics background are now being called data scientists, and people with governance background, data governance backgrounds, are now being called CDO. That's my view of the world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and also, unless we look at it that way, right? Unless we start to give this person a seat at the table and start to look at data from the very beginning, we will only be in sort of in a reactive stage. You cannot truly be proactive. You cannot be looking at what are all the things that I can actually predict so that I don't have to spend 100% of the time, right? Because whether a human intervenes and looks at it 100% of the time or a machine intervenes, you cannot achieve 100% accuracy. Right? So the question is, do you want to spend 100% effort and achieve 80% accuracy? Or do you want to spend 5% effort and achieve 80% accuracy? That's really the question.
Absolutely.
And the rate at which things are going, you cannot afford to not do that.
Right.
It's something that you cannot afford to ignore.
Right.
That's kind
and
of
another thing is, in the last 3 minutes that we've left, our clients are talking about disruption, they're talking about data, they're talking about digital, and they're also talking about design and design thinking. Are you seeing the same with your clients as well? At least I'm seeing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the time difference between when you could design systems and then figure out what to do with it, it has really shrunk. Right? From the very beginning, you want to design systems that are going to be proactive, that are going to be at scale, that are going to deliver decisions that are actually impactful to the business. Right. You don't have time for trial and error anymore.
So let's shift gears and talk about how the services industry, and especially the people in the audience who are entrepreneurs who may be thinking of starting a services-based business, what should they do differently now? And again, tying it to what we heard in the morning during our keynotes, that you have to have learning, you have to have artificial intelligence and machine learning built into your company. How would you apply that to a services company?
Yeah, so I want to bring up, I think the best definition of data science that I have seen is one by Drew Conway. I think there was also an improvement to it, that was added. So really, you have to have the domain expertise, you really have to do sort of real-time computing, as well as, of course, statistics is a given. I think we all know that. But also how to communicate that, right? The communication piece also becomes very important. So I think from the very beginning, we need to start looking at data not just from the perspective of, okay, what fancy techniques can I apply to it, but more, what does that data really mean? What does that mean to my business, right? And what, in this particular domain, what does it mean? And how is it going to actually apply when I'm trying to get business outcomes from it? So if you look at data science, right, I feel that there's perhaps a bit too much emphasis on the technique and perhaps a little less on the domain, as well as, how exactly it's going to apply in production, and how are you going to convince the people, right? The way you communicate the results to a business audience is different from how you communicate it to a software engineering group, as opposed to senior management, as opposed to your customers. So I think that becomes the sort of the difficult thing to do. I think if we can look at all of that from the very beginning, it becomes highly effective.
Great. Well, that was a great answer. And I know we're out of time because Mohan is here. We don't have any tweet-worthy quote, but if you wanted to connect with Revati, she will be outside. We'll go outside and have a conversation. And with that, thank you very much.